Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to the program. It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show, live here for July 4th, 2023. I'm your host for this week's edition of the show, Jeff Gerstmann. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be back. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Tuesday. I suppose it's a holiday in some parts of the world. Well, one part of the world. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you have the day off and you're like hanging out. In which case, hello. Welcome to the program. Yeah, like I was saying during the pre-show, there's, not a ton of news this week because it's just been, I think everyone's been on vacation already. So, there's not a ton going on these last several days, which has been, a little nice, I guess, that it's kind of, calmed down ever so slightly. But I don't know. Then that's undercut with like just, I don't know. So there's nasty. There's a lot of layoffs and badness out there in the world these days. I don't need to tell you. You're out there. I also have some bad news for later in the program. I do have a drink here that I picked up a Ghost Orange Cream because I like to sometimes you just need to drink a good drink for a change. And while I was at the gas station, so yesterday, so excited, I made it back to the Best Buy. I mean, I bought it on the internet, but I made it to the Best Buy, and I said, take this Asus Rog Ally and shove it up your pants, and slapped it down the deck. No, I returned that thing. Very happy about it. Very happy that I returned. It would have been very easy to not return it and be like, well, I don't know, I could always just use it as a weird server thing and put it in the closet or what, but like that thing was just the heat issue was so immensely bad. Like, again, having a thing where I'm playing a game on it and suddenly the D drive disappears because the SD card has slid out of its slot due to heat. Unacceptable. And then, well, whatever. Go back and listen to last week's show. I talked about it for like an hour, but like it's the software really that's the big problem with that. It's such a miserable experience. And then when you're playing games, you're not really part of that experience as much, and you're like, this plays games really well, but like everything about that thing, navigating it, working with it, terrible. Just a terrible device. Like shockingly so. And I was I have not had hugely negative experiences with the Republic of Gamers. And I think that's been limited to, I think I maybe had a graphics card generation or two back. And I think this monitor here has been good to me. But as soon as I said like, oh, this thing seems like it has like really like some pretty bad quality control issues. I'm not the only person out there that is having this heat and SD card problem. Seems like it's not every unit out there, but enough people that you're like, ugh. And then most of the feedback I got back was people saying like, well, yeah, it's an Asus device. What do you expect? Those people are fucking idiots. This terrible. Like they're terrible. Like, oh, well, I did not even know that they had a rep like that out there, but people were. And then one person was like, you're pronouncing Asus incorrectly. So I'm sorry. I can't think of any other. Is it ISIS? Is that it? I don't know how to else. I'm going to stick with Asus. Yeah, pretty rotten device. It's a shame too, because obviously, it is a little bit more powerful than the Steam Deck, and higher resolution. The screen on it's really nice, but unfortunately, the getting updates from 3 different places, whatever. I don't want to rehash the whole hour of the show last week, but like I messed with that thing for a couple of more days after last week's show, thinking like, if it's iffy, maybe I'll hang on to it. and then just had like 5 or 6 more problems with it. I was like, man, fuck this thing. I don't need it. And I went back to the Steam Deck after not having touched the Steam Deck for like a couple of weeks because I got this instead, and was like, well, this is lighter and this will be better in bed because it's lighter and I can hold it, whatever it is. I was like, this Steam Deck, it's fantastic. It's not perfect, and in both cases, I would love to see them iterate and see what a next generation device looks like. But at the end of the day, the Asus device is it's running stock Windows, and that's good in a lot of ways. But the cons of that are they did not build a device that was good at navigating Windows. And so there's a lot of fit and finish, like, oh, you didn't account for you at no point during the development of that device did they stop and think like, we want this to almost be a console like experience if desired. We want there to be a very smooth path for people who just want to fire it up and play games. Their solution to that is Armory Crate, the worst piece of software I've used in ages. And sometimes it doesn't toggle you over to the right gamepad mode, and so it's just not ready for prime time. They'll get there maybe through, or I'm sure it will improve through firmware updates and so on and so forth. But like, the heat issue being bad enough to literally physically force the SD card to slide out of the slot was one of those things that I was looking at and going like, well, this is too hot to touch. In fact, I had to get my SD card out of the slot so that I could return it. And I had just cut my fingernails and I couldn't really get in there and get it out. I couldn't, there was, and so I was like, oh, I'll just load up a game. And so I literally put the Halo Infinite main menu on for about 6 minutes. And that generated enough heat for me to reach in and just very easily grab the SD card out. Just madness. Just madness. Anyway, so I was very happy to return that thing and, get that $740 back because yikes. Just yikes. And then the Steam Deck is on sale for like 20% off on top of that. So yeah, anyway, again, I don't think it needs to turn into some kind of Steam Deck versus ROG Ally thing per se. But the people at Valve spent a lot more time thinking about integrating software and hardware together in an intelligent way. Whereas on the ROG side of things, they were just like, I don't know, we've had this software around for years. Let's just put that on it and that'll be fine, right? And like, no, it's not. It is in fact not fine. On the way back, I stopped at a gas station and I was like, I'm going to get some drinks for me to drink. And so I got 2 cans of Ghost, the second of which is here. And then I was like, oh, wait, I should check and see if they have this. And they did. I bought one, and I really don't know what I want to even do with it, but I have it. It's cold. I should probably drink it soon or put it back in the fridge and delay, And it's a hard monster. Got me a hard monster here. White Haze. This is a 6% alcohol can of Monster. And I'm very curious about it. Unfortunately, again, due to the nanny state, am I right? This doesn't have any caffeine in it. So it totally betrays, like, there's nothing monstrous about this at all because it's not an energy drink. It has no caffeine. It has no energy bits in it. It is just a 6% flavored drink or whatever, because they can't sell those in the country. We talk to you about independence. We talk to you about my rights as an American. God damn it! I should be able to, if I want to shoot holes in the side of my truck with a 12 gauge shotgun. Who are you to tell me otherwise? If I want to drink caffeinated alcohol and then punch out the windows of cop cars for the rest of the day. I thought this was America. If I want to spray paint my name on this, all the sign in front of the DMV, and then push a goat down a hill, I thought this was America. But apparently not. Apparently not. This country has gone soft, and look no further than the Reformula. No, I actually, I mostly kid. It was a dark day when they took, when they reformulated Four Loko, and all the, sparks and everything kind of disappeared off the shelves. They reformulated it with no energy stuff and then put it back on the shelves, and it was like end of an era type shit. It was like, this is fucking whack now. This is like, what's the point? Like, now you're telling me here's this drink that tastes mostly bad. It's like 11% and that's it. And it tastes like shit. And you're like, well, no, I don't really need, like, I could go any number of different directions if I'm just looking to get drunk. There are a billion different directions to go that don't involve drinking straight trash. The benefit was always, hey man, these Four Locos, they've got like an energy drink in there. And you're like, yes. Use that to offset the alcohol, and then let's get to work. Then let's storm the Capitol. No, and yeah, so but I started drinking way less not long after that, so it probably, and I never really had a huge problem with the there were all these stories, like Four Loko became this very, like, the boogeyman, like of alcoholic drinks, because they were like, college kids are drinking a Four Loko and then not remembering what happens to them, and then, to which I would say, well, they're fucking soft. What do you want me to say? Because I don't know. That's I've never been. I am cursed with the opposite. Well, I don't know. It's been so long since I've really even had a drink that I don't even, who knows what's changed over the years, but like, I was cursed with eternal sight. And so I would drink a whole lot and then wake up and remember every single goddamn moment. And just wake up and go, oh man, I got it. Yeah. No, that was bad. We don't. People are going to tell stories about what they saw me doing in the bar. All right. Okay. I've got some phone calls to make, whatever. And so like the whole notion of like, oh man, you drink a Four Loko and then you just have no idea what's happening, and like, and the caffeine keeps you like seemingly up and around, like you're totally normal, or at least like cognizant of what is around you, but you're actually fully blacked out. And I'm like, I don't know, this stuff never really seemed that scary to me. I don't know, but yeah, but at the same time, like, yeah, it seemed like it was causing enough problems for people that we need to go back to. It's the same way with piracy, right? When casual piracy, when you could just copy a VHS tape for somebody and go, here you go, it was too easy for people to copy tapes for each other. And so they came up with macro vision protection, to where like some weird thing where if you copied that VHS tape for somebody, their copy would come out all red and messed up. Unless you had a better VCR, and I, eventually got a better VCR and whatever. They were never going to stop like truly dedicated pirates. But the idea of just like, I'm just going to copy this for a friend, and then he's not going to pay for it. Like they made it harder for casual pirates. The same with floppy disks, Commodore 64 games with protection. People cracked that protection all the time, and all that sort of stuff. But for me, who just wanted to copy Commodore games from my cousin, that was enough to stop me, because half the games wouldn't copy properly. Until I got something called the RAM board installed in my floppy drive and used a program called Maverick that worked with the RAM board. And that would make it, you could copy a lot more games with it. And so the RAM board, I don't know what it, there was an expansion for the RAM board that I didn't have that put a knob on the outside of your drive, and you would turn the speed of the floppy drive down. And at lower speeds, you could copy the copy protection and run off copies of the disc at these lower speeds. It's a weird device. Very weird device. My parents got it for me. My parents got it for me and got it installed. And like, check this out. But the problem with a lot of that shit, because people were, there were still people out there cracking groups, cracking games and distributing them online and on BBSs and all that sort of stuff. But basically a lot of these programs that were made for idiots like me only worked with specific games, and they would issue a monthly disc that was like, here's parameters for how to crack, or that will let you copy these 30 games. And so you would have to pay a subscription service to keep up with the latest parameters and have them sent to your house. So you'd be like, oh, what are we copying? G.I. Joe? Okay, I think that was June 1985. Okay, here's the parameters for this. We'll put that in. It'll read the parameters. So it was like they created a racket of their own for, that you had to pay for to copy the discs. And it was like real silly. And so, it was just far easier to traffic in copies that were already cracked as opposed to any of this RAM board Maverick parameter business, but it still felt pretty cool when it worked. You're like, yeah, fuck yeah. Look at this thing. So yeah, hey, they've got to make it, you can still mix a Red Bull with vodka is my point. There are still ways out there to pirate just about whatever you're looking for, and you can still pour vodka into a Red Bull, but they can't just sell it in stores pre-mixed because that's too much for people to handle. Just like you can't just copy the VHS tapes. It's too much for people to handle. Yeah, well, I don't know. Let's, while this is as cold as it's ever going to be, why don't we just crack this one open first? I got white haze flavor. There are 3 different flavors, I think. There was one that was green. And then I figured, well, White Monster is the monster of record for people that love to drink Monster. So why not get the alcoholic White Monster? That's what they call me in the streets. Anyway, so this is White Haze. It's a terrible name. I don't know if I'm going to drink this whole thing because honestly, it's fucking 10:30 in the morning. And we've got people coming over. It smells sickly sweet. Citrusy. Yeah, like a citrusy sweetness. It actually smells pretty good. How many calories? That's a good question. I guess alcohol doesn't have to say, right? Like there's different rules, but it's 6%. It is 6% alcohol. Let's find out. Oh, it has been a long time since I've had any alcohol. Like literal years, I think it's been. And even then, I think I had like one one drink or something. But like, what kind of alcohol? You know, it's probably the same stuff that they put into, like, it's a malt beverage. So like a Smirnoff Ice or a Zima. Yuck. Oh, yeah. So, you know, this is a real bummer because it tastes kind of like that White Monster. And you're like, yes, but then it has the malt beverage flavor to it that hits you on the back end and reminds you, like, hey, this is an alcoholic drink. And you're like, right, yes, it sure is. I wonder, you know, do you think that they have a chart somewhere at Monster headquarters where they're like, well, what we think is going to happen, and here's what we think should happen. All right, here's how this should probably work. People should buy one of these and then pair it with the existing Monster of the same flavor and then pour them together and then drink it, which I know probably not, right? Because that's a little too much fluid. And then you're watering this down to where it's like, I mean, I guess it would be 3% by then. And so, you know, it's barely got enough. It's barely got any alcohol in it at that point. Ooh. Yeah, I mean, if you've drank a lot of malt beverages, whether that's Four Loko, whether that's you know, even Mickey's, like actual malt liquor, but really, if you drank any of these malt beverages, the Smirnoff Ices of the world, you know exactly what this tastes like. At least on the back end, you know exactly what the alcohol part of this tastes like because it hits you. You're like, oh right, yes, that's yes. It's just that the front end of it tastes a little bit like a White Monster, and those two things don't mix together very well. In this quantity, at least, in this ratio. That hint of bad caramel at the end, yeah, kind of like that. Oh, yeah, but it is all at the end. I used to, you know, we're talking, you know, early to mid 2000s at this point, but because that's really when a lot of the Four Loko and Spark stuff was in its prime. I drank a lot of shit like this. I drank a lot of these types of malt beverages, a lot of these types of like fruity malt beverages. Dating back to the 90s when I was in a band. We'll get to this. We got probably a few episodes of Game Boys to Men before we really get into the band stuff. But when Glenn and I started that band, we basically, I was about to turn 21. I was 20 when we started the band and turned 21 around the time that we were, you know, thinking about going on tours and you know, and playing around and playing more shows and whatever else. And so, like, you know, we would just be in some random shitty motel room in Central California, you know, just Motel 6 outside of Modesto, you know, 2 cars and like 12 people get out and check into 2 rooms. That is when St. Ides Special Brew was all the rage. And St. Ides Special Brew was the first fruity malt beverage I had ever come into contact with. And we drank a ton of it. I was drinking a lot of malt liquor. I was drinking a lot of 40s and stuff like back then in California anyway. Your rules may vary, and maybe you live in a state that still sells them this way. To which I say, you are in some ways more America than we are. That you used to be able to get a 64 ounce bottle of malt liquor, just like a fucking 64 ouncer of Mickey's or Old English, and you know, 40s are big, but you can grip them. And now, I don't know, a lot of 40s are sold in plastic. Like, I think a lot of the rules have changed that they can't even sell them in glass because glass is too much fun, I guess. Breaking glass is too exciting. It's too engaging. It's too much fun. And the 64s were like jugs, man. You could, it was hard. You were drinking it like a fucking baby bottle. It should have had a ring on it. Like Pappy's fucking jug, like, you know, or whatever. But, 64s got outlawed not long. I think 64s were technically outlawed before I even turned 21. I think I was 20 drinking 64s. But, anyway. We would go on tour. We got into that fruity malt liquor, and you know, Mad Dog, and you know, all the Cisco and all the real rotten. You know, Cisco's like a fortified rice wine. Is that what it is? Mad Dog, I think, is the same thing. That stuff is disturbing. This is just like, hey, check it out. It's a can of Monster, but bad. Bah. It's no fun. This is no fun. I don't want to. I don't know that I'm going to drink any more of this. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't really drink much anymore. Mostly because I'm not really in those sort of social situations. You get to a point where like, there was a decade there or so where like most of my friends were bar friends. And then we would hang out and do other stuff, but it was always a little weird because it was just like, I'm not used to seeing you when the sun is up. This is, I don't know about this. Yuck. And then one day you kind of wake up and go like, well, I'm just not really drinking as much as I used to. And then like, I'm not really hanging out in bars as much as I used to. And then you just kind of drift away from your bar friends. And that's kind of it. I guess is how that works. Let's get into an actual proper drink here. A Ghost Orange Cream. Something I can believe in. Spilled it all over myself. This is going great. I say like, oh, I haven't had a drink. You know, like whatever. Oh, was drink one bad or oh God? It's just bad. It's just bad. It's not oh God. But it doesn't go on the list because it's not an energy drink. So it's just crummy. I think there will come a time here, and you know, ideally within the next 12 to 18 months or something, where like I want to go back to PAX and I want to start getting out again and going to some things. Like I'm not going to make it to PAX this year because we have a kid on the way and all that sort of stuff, right? But you know, on the other side of that, like I see myself at some point going like, yeah, I'm gonna go to PAX and do a thing. I'm gonna go to you know, maybe go to GDC or something or whatever, you know. E3 and that sort of thing is a little different because I live close enough to it now that I can theoretically drive home at night, but or DICE or whatever. But like I do envision myself that when I do get back out on the road like that, you end up with, it's one of those things, you end up with a certain crowd of people and you're like drinking in a lot of hotel bars. So I'm not sitting here saying to you, oh, I don't drink or anything like that. Like you know, it's nothing is, you know, it's not so much that I quit drinking or whatever else. It's more that just like staying home, you know, you don't really have a lot of opportunities for it. And, you know, like I never, like, I don't really drink for the taste of it. I drink for the effects of it. And so at that point, why would I do that alone at home? That's never been the type of drinker that I've been. I've always been that kind of like social binge drinker, whatever you want to call it. And so now that I've got like little kids and stuff, there's always that feeling of like, I need to stay stone cold fucking sober, because what if I have to drive to a hospital? What if something happens? What if, one of these kids falls and hits their head? I got to be on my shit. And so, that's certainly a factor, but it's just like, I don't know. There's just no pull. There's no real desire there. Like, it's just like, yeah, what am I going to have a beer? And then like, oh, it's 7 p.m. and now I have a weird headache. Thanks, the 2 beers I drank. Like, it's pointless. It's pointless. It's a waste of goddamn time. If you're not drinking 10 drinks, then you might as well drink 0 drinks. Probably not the healthiest attitude to have. But there you go. And I never liked alcohol with food. So, the idea of just like, we're going to have a backyard barbecue and crack open some cold ones. I'm like, no, let's drink Diet Pepsis. Let's, I don't have like, beer is the exact opposite of refreshing to me. Like, there's nothing about it that like on a hot day where I'm like, yes, let's warm up our insides with the fucking power of alcohol so that our insides are as hot as the outside. Like, no, it's just like when I drink, I get warm anyway. So it's just like, it's fucking pointless. It's a terrible, terrible time. A terrible time. Don't drink. That's my official advice. Is just don't. I've been playing some video games. We've talked about a handful of them a little bit here, but we have not talked about them in podcast form. Of course, AEW Fight Forever came out. Bunch of videos of that up on the YouTube channel. And I am having trouble loading this up. Like I'm having trouble finding a reason to launch it and play it, I guess I would say. So it's kind of, it's boring. I think, we talked about a lot of the stuff around it last week where it's just like, hey, this thing is an incredibly shallow experience. I don't think it does a great job of representing the AEW wrestling product on television. It's just a very middling experience. It has a real budget experience kind of thing going for it. But unfortunately it's $60. But if it was $30, we would feel a lot better about it, I think. You'd be like, yeah, cool, all right. Yeah, the roster's out of date and they don't have full entrances, and some of the wrestlers, all the wrestlers kind of move and do the same thing and whatever else. And so, it's sort of, I was going to say it's a good first attempt, but I don't know that I would go far enough to say it's a good first attempt. It's a first attempt. And it sounds like they'll build on it. There were interviews out there with Kenny Omega, who I believe is technically credited as the creative director on the game, kind of confirming that it will have some kind of stadium stampede, like battle royale-esque mode or something, which sounds ridiculous in a way that could be fun. And I would certainly like to try that. I hope that they add to it, but like, the core of it feels like it needs more work before you start adding things like wrestlers and create-a-wrestler parts and whatever else. Like, there's just foundational stuff that I wish it was a little bit better at. But we'll see. I will say that, the one thing I guess we haven't really talked about since I streamed it was that the game came out and I've played it on PC and on a Steam Deck, and it seems to run fine in both places there. Also, the DLC situation is just kind of funky. Particularly on PC, where they didn't take pre-orders. Okay, so Matt Hardy was originally supposed to be a pre-order character. Like, you pre-order the game and you get Matt Hardy. Like, okay, I guess. On PC, Matt Hardy is just $5. Just. And you get Matt Hardy and Broken Matt Hardy, which those are just skins. That's not even it's not like two characters. And then they have what is called the FTR Revival Pack. Expand your AEW roster with FTR, the former AEW World Tag Team Champions Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. Also gain access to 2 brand new mini games, Join Us and Death Race X. Death Race X is a skateboarding... I don't know. It's $12 for 2 characters and 2 mini games. And then on top of that, so the game has some bits and pieces in there where you can take 2 characters and make them a team. And so if you select both of those characters, Well, no, they're the ROH tag champions, aren't they? No. Yeah, Pat, you're right. The copy is out of date. Because it says former world tag team champions, and yet even the copy is fucking data. Amazing. Well, according to the game, they are the former champions, because who are the tag champions in game are the Bucks. So when you unlock these characters, they get added to the roster. But there is a thing in there, there's a concept of teams in there where the announcer, like if you pick 2 of the same like characters that are on the same team, they could have a team entrance, they could have team finishers, the announcer will announce their team name. And there's a bunch of team names in there that are not in the game at all if you want to make your own teams, right? And some of the teams are not complete. Like they have like Dark Order is in there, but like there's only 2 characters in there that are members of Dark Order. When you get FTR, technically FTR is a team, but they are not created in-game as a team. So you have to go into the Create Team menu, add the 2 members of FTR, have the announcer call them FTR, go and set a social media handle for FTR, figure out what the finishers for the FTR, what team finishers they should have. It's the Shatter Machine. Should they have another one? I don't know. But you have to go in and scroll through the list and go, okay, well, we want S. Okay, Shatter Machine. Okay. And do all of that yourself, because the game doesn't treat them as a tag team at all until you go in and do that. And I think that's just it's shitty. It's cool that you can go in there and make your own teams because sometimes you're whatever headcanon you've got, like, oh, what if these guys teamed up and they did this and you can make your own custom teams and have fun with it. But for them to just like be an existing team and for it to not be in there automatically after you unlock the characters is just another one of those things you just look at and going, fuck, guys, come on. Meet me halfway on this shit. It's already ridiculous that you're charging $12 for this. And then they're also selling a season pass, which includes the FTR pack, and the season pass is $30. So I guess if you're going to spend $12, you might as well spend $30, because then you will get the FTR shit, but you will also get the second pack will be the Bunny and Keith Lee, plus 2 new mini games, MJF Car Thrash and Sloth Sling. And then the third pack is the Hookhausen Very Handsome, Very Evil pack, which gives you Hook and Danhausen, and apparently no new mini games for that one. The big so my understanding, people are saying like, wait, why is the FTR's finisher not in there as Big Rig? My understanding is that they changed the name back. I think that they are just calling it Shatter Machine again. That they called it Big Rig for a while, and then one of them on Twitter was like, "Oh, Shatter Machine's such a better name," and so they changed it back. So Shatter Machine is technically correct again. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's that's $30 for 6 wrestlers and 4 mini games. I don't know, man. It's just it's pretty thin soup at this point over at AEW Fight Forever. And the add-on plans sound intriguing in some ways, but also underwhelming in others. And yeah, it's unfortunate, I guess I would say. Like, parts of it play well, and I think it's like it's a fun game. Like, I would say I enjoy playing the video game part of it more than any of the WWE games over the last, since WWE All-Stars, I guess I would say. But certainly any of the mainline WWE games, which are just dreadful video games. But I don't know that it's yeah, I don't know. A more up-to-date roster, the ability to share created characters online, like there's just like standard stuff missing from the game that you just look at and go like, fucking come on. It feels budget. It feels extremely budget, but then they decided to charge $60 for it. That's the main problem. Again, like, this conversation gets way shorter if they came out at $30. You'd just be like, well, I mean, it's missing core features that a game should have, but it's $30. I also played some Mars First Logistics. That video is up on YouTube. Mars First Logistics is amazing. I think it is it's in early access, so they've got more to add to it, but it feels pretty robust for what's there right now. It is basically a cargo hauling game on Mars. You are bringing objects from point A to point B, and the shapes of those objects and the delicacy of, like, are they delicate or not? Like, a crate of oranges is a true delicacy if you're on Mars. So I guess delicacy works. And you have to bring those things from point A to point B. The catch is that, you have to build a vehicle in some cases that is capable of bringing that object from point A to point B. And so you get all these different parts and different rotating points and whatever else. So you can put a hook on it and then control it so that it extends, it rotates, it lifts, it, like whatever other, pivot points you want to put onto those parts. You can build that into your vehicle. And so it becomes this process of like looking at the object like it's a folded up umbrella. What the fuck do I do to get this? How do I carry this on my vehicle? How do I even get it down from the shelf it's on to get it onto my vehicle in the first place? And you're figuring out these things, and you're kind of delicately driving it across very rough, hilly terrain on Mars to try to get it from one point to the other. I played it with a controller. It works really well on Steam Deck as well. And it has a great look to it. And an amazing soundtrack, but it also feels really good. The building tools, again, I was using a controller, which you might think would be a little clunky, but I found building vehicles to be very easy. They thought of things like, I just need to insert a piece in the middle here. You're like, I can take this whole chunk off, copy it to a clipboard, add one more piece, and then take my clipboard and paste it back on. Like, it's really easy to reshape your vehicle kind of as you see fit. And you're earning currency that you can use to buy more parts. So if you're like, I need another hydraulic thing here because I need to be able to extend and then extend again, or whatever it is you're trying to do, you can buy more parts too. It's a very Lego-like sort of contraption that you're building over time. The last big thing I unlocked were rockets. And then you get into like multiple types of control, and it's got like this it's a little easier to configure. But it has a Gary's Mod-like quality to it of like, I'm going to put these rockets on the back, and then I want this button to control the rockets, and then this button to do the wheels. And so you can kind of configure your controls in a way that makes sense to you. And then when you're firing the rocket boosters, you fucking take off flying. For better or for worse. If you're trying to carry something from point A to point B, having rockets and you're tumbling through the fucking sky, maybe not the best. So what I ended up doing that has been working out okay for me so far is I'm putting the rockets on the top of the vehicle, meaning they fire up, meaning they force the vehicle down. And so as you're driving over rough terrain, if you want extra traction, if you want to stick to the ground and not flip, you just fucking hit the rockets, and it just fucking cements you to the ground. And also you go a lot faster, weirdly enough, because you're all that downforce, then you're getting so much traction on Mars that you're just fucking, you really start going pretty fast with your wheels too. And it's super fun to just like, because you can just slap this stuff together and go like, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? And start to like idiot your way into a vehicle that works to actually solve the problem. You start with something and you're like, it's rolling over too much. I need a wider wheelbase. So you extend out the wheels in a dumb way. You're like, okay, well, it's definitely not going to roll now. But now it's got this other problem of it's tilting forward because I'm carrying this very heavy thing. I need to get more weight on the back of this thing. How do I do that? And so that's how I approach. It's easy enough to pop into and out of the vehicle editor over and over again to try and just like cobble together a working solution instead of just like stripping it all down and going back to the drawing board and be like, I'm going to build the perfect vehicle. Like, no, it's way more fun to just like try to figure out how to like make the thing that you have work just a little bit better for this specific situation. And you're like, I'll save it in case this comes up again, but we're stripping this thing back down as soon as this one's done and building something else from scratch. And it's great looking game, controls amazingly well for what it is. And I think it has an incredible soundtrack. They're selling the soundtrack alongside the game on Steam. I believe the soundtrack is also on Spotify, if that's your thing. Anyway, Mars First Logistics. They showed the trailer at Day of the Devs a few weeks back, and I remember looking at it and going like, well, fuck, man. If that works as well as it looks like it could, that would be amazing, and it is. I'm having a fantastic time with it. Again, it's in early access. They've got more plans for what they want to do. I think if they had the ability to share created designs and do some other silly stuff like that, that might be a good time too. But give it a look for sure, even if it's a little too early for your tastes, which like I said, I think there's actually quite a bit of game there so far. Keep it on your radar because it really seems like it'll be something special as they kind of keep building it. And the last thing I've been playing, I guess, is Trackmania. Have you heard of this? Today is the day. If you, I believe today is the day for everybody, but if you bought 3 years of Trackmania access back when the game came out in 2020, today is likely your expiration date. And so Trackmania has officially been out for 3 years. The new summer campaign came out on the 1st, and I've been playing that. They made some gameplay tweaks to how the cars control on ice in a way to make it a little better, I guess. But that's, it's still Trackmania. I don't know what to tell you. It's cross-platform now, so that's led to some slight community changes where it seems like the more popular servers are the ones being run by Ubisoft and not the player-hosted servers. I think player-hosted servers don't show up on console. I'm not positive. I need to go check, but unfortunately, your subscription access does not carry across all platforms. So I renewed last night and loaded it up this morning to see what my new expiration date was. And there was something very sobering. Not reassuring per se, but there was something very... sobering is probably the word I would use. To look at a screen and have it say, your club access will expire July 4th, 2026. I was like, man, 20, like just the I don't think I have had to have a single conversation with anyone about the year 2026 in a real way in terms of like, well, here's a thing that's happening in 2026. I know that the Microsoft trial has probably brought up years like that as well. So maybe we'll get a little bit into our far-flung future when we talk about that stuff. But something about the very idea, it just doesn't seem like a real number. It doesn't seem like a Nothing about that seems attainable. No, like 2026, we'll all be long dead by then. Like, just something real weird about that. But there you go. I signed up for 3 more years of Trackmania. I hope that they are. I hope that the next 3 years of Trackmania are better than the last 3 years of Trackmania. Not for Trackmania, I mean for society. Trackmania has been fine. Yeah, I don't know. Trackmania is still great. I don't know. They did some revamping to it a while ago and changed up some of the menus, and they started giving you rewards for getting medals on the campaign tracks. Like you unlock prestige skins or something, which is kind of a neat little thing. And yeah, all of that stuff is still intact, and people are still out there making tracks for it and running servers for it and doing all of that stuff, and that's good. And the new campaign seems fun, and it's, I don't know, I like having Trackmania installed. I don't play it every day, but I play it a few times a month, I guess I would say, and it's nice to always be able to just kind of come back to it and still have a good time with Trackmania. All right, why don't we get into the news here? Gollum is in the news. People hate this fucking guy. Turns out. This is a rough story, man. Kotaku has this. I mean, a lot of this. This originally comes from a report from a German news magazine called Gameswirtschaft, which is fun to say, but the message is not nice. Daedalic Entertainment, the developers and publishers of The Lord of the Rings Gollum, has announced that they are shutting down their development arm and focusing strictly on publishing. They are not going to develop any games of their own anymore. They're merely going to publish other people's stuff, which is largely what they're known for. They did grow this development team. I don't know what year they actually built the internal development and how long they've actually been running it, but they're going to be laying off 25 people. And they say it's a difficult decision that'll mark a new beginning for Daedalic. They still have 8 games coming in this fiscal year that are, I believe, all developed externally. And yeah, there's a bit of okay. It's basically Lord of the Rings Gollum seems to have sunk their efforts in a way that they're like, oh, we're just going to run away from this screaming. Even though The Lord of the Rings Gollum did not live up to the expectations we had for the game, we are very grateful for the opportunity and the learning experience it brought us. That's according to a representative that sent this to Kotaku. It's a difficult break, but also a new beginning in the already long history of Daedalic Entertainment. We value each and every member of our team very much, and it is important to us that the transition goes as well as possible. We will therefore support our former employees in finding new opportunities within our network. They had been working on another Lord of the Rings game that had not been formally announced or whatever. I guess it was some kind of action-adventure game that they had codenamed It's Magic. And Surviving Naponia, which I guess Atomic Torch is going to be the primary developer of that now. Development efforts are going to be moved solely over there. So that's a colony simulator they announced last month. So yeah, that's that Lord of the Rings Gollum game. We played it. There's a video up if you want to watch me play some of it. That game is not good. That game is misguided, I guess I would say. That game feels like it feels like a remake or a remaster of an original Xbox game that doesn't exist. It has like OG Xbox third-party game vibes, but exclusive to Xbox, where someone's like, we're going to use the power of Xbox to bring the Lord of the Rings to life in a way that's never that's never been done before. And here's our new Gollum game, and you play it, and you're like, this is like another shitty this is just another garbage platformer. Like, why does the Xbox have so many weird 3D platformers that are not any good and are entirely forgettable? It's like the game that Gwen Stefani did the voice for, the fucking Skittles game, Darkened Skies, I think, was that the Skittles game? Malice is the Gwen Stefani game. Azaric, like, it's just like, there's just this weird list of games that only came out on that first Xbox that you just look at and go like, this was a weird time. There are a lot of strange products that like just came out as a matter of course, and no one really remembers them per se, but they sure did happen. Lord of the Rings Gollum felt like one of those. It felt like a game that was originally developed for the original Xbox, and yet it came out this year. That's why I say, like, in some ways, it felt like a really clunky remaster or bad remake of a game that came out in 2002. Just some very questionable ideas, top to bottom, and just a real weird thing. But not so broken or terrible that it felt like something that was going to delete a studio from existence. That's maybe a little shocking. That's maybe a little like, oh shit, man. You maybe had a little bit more riding on this product than maybe you let on. Because gosh, that's fucking wild. And they put out an apology back when the game came out, saying that I think there's still one more patch that will hit for Lord of the Rings Gollum. Yeah, that's according to the original story. There's still some patch in the works for that thing. And I guess that's that. I don't. That's yeah. KDR asks, is Lord of the Rings just a cursed property? I'm gonna say maybe it is now. I don't know. I feel like Monolith had a couple of good games with the Mordor games, and those games worked well in spite of the franchise or because of it. Whether is up for debate, I guess. But those were quality products. But yeah, I don't know. Between this and then Embracer buying the rights to the Lord of the Rings, and then Embracer going through whatever fucking collapse that is happening over there. Yeah, 42 says it's a lame IP. I don't know. That's maybe a little harsh, but I think we were talking about it a little bit last week. Was it last week? I think it was last week. Around the Embracer stuff, that it was like this idea of just like, Lord of the Rings is certainly big. Let's not be stupid, but it doesn't seem like a big that immediately translates into games, which is weird because you'd think you'd be able to do a zillion different Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, with Lord of the Rings shit, because it's just another fantasy realm and whatever else, right? But those movies did huge fucking gangbusters dollars, and then but like all of the games that were going to happen in the wake of those films already happened. And those movies are big, but is Lord of the Rings as big? Because you'd have stuff that was like, oh, well, it's almost like a Witcher situation where it's like, this is not based on the movies. We don't have the rights to any of the movies. This is really, we're going back to the books, and we're going back to the books. And I think that when you don't have the stuff that the movies already had, that the movies kind of made massive, I think that players are maybe not interested. Well, clearly it's a thing that, is not doing as well as it seems like it maybe should be. Because I think when you think about Lord of the Rings, you think about it as this massive multimedia property or whatever, but like, I don't know. Maybe because they're doing new movies, right? But like, is that gonna, who knows? You'd think like, oh, well, those new movies will clearly be huge because people loved those other movies, but who knows? Because they did What are those yeah, okay, yeah. It says the Hobbit movies really devalued the IP. Yeah, those Hobbit movies came out, right? I don't even know. I liked that Hobbit cartoon when I was a kid. I remember liking that, even though I thought that the dude looked weird. His face too big. Strange. Too weird for me as a kid. But yeah, I don't know. That television show, whatever Embracer did, you know, like there's just stuff all up and down this franchise that you just look at and go like, maybe this thing is not as popular as it seems. Maybe just people really liked those movies and like everything aligned for one brief moment. And by one brief moment, I mean like the 6 years or whatever that it took for all those movies to come out. And then once that happened, people were like, that's cool. Those movies were long. Anyway, we're into Marvel now. Like, right? I mean, the mainstream film audience just went from like, I mean, there's some steps in between, I'm sure, but you know. That's cool and all, but have you seen Tony Stark? That man's got a metal suit. Take that. Hobbit? What, you walking with a ring? We're over here blowing up buildings. Why don't you guys step it up a notch? So that's why I'm proud to announce my modern retelling of the story of Lord of the Rings. It's set in modern times. It's about a PMC. Hobbit Squadron. The Gollum Brigade. There's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. We're very contemporary. Except everyone smokes pipe weed in this one too. That's the one thing we decided to keep. This story is maybe more indicative of like a trend, or I guess I'm watching this to see if this becomes a trend or if this is a real trend or not, because the actual story itself is, you know, Tiny Build's stock has taken a huge hit after all of their games performed below expectations. Tiny Build, if you don't know, I should pull up a list here. Because Tiny Build, it felt like their name was on a ton of games all of a sudden. They're an indie developer that has gotten into publishing and done all of this stuff here. Hello Neighbor is one of theirs. Punch Club is one of theirs. They recently announced Sand. That's their game. Crater Cove is theirs. Kill It With Fire 2. Just a kind of a wide variety of indie games. However, you know, their stock has taken a hit. The CEO said, as CEO and as a major shareholder, I'm disappointed with our first half performance. What fills me with confidence is that we have an incredibly strong pipeline of new games under development with the potential to create multiple new long-lasting franchises. There'll be some organizational changes and you know, whatever else. There's they're saying we're transforming the company at speed to adapt to new industry trends, and their stock fell by almost 80%. Again, the you know, the specifics of Tiny Build, maybe not like that interesting of a story on its own, but I guess we're seeing, you know, this is a small company. Embracer, obviously a much larger company that took a fucking massive hit. And also we're just seeing a lot of stuff like this across the board. I remember having a conversation with someone 2020, 2021, you know, kind of mid-pandemic, early to mid-pandemic, when numbers were through the fucking roof. And I remember talking to someone who was like, yeah, man, every studio I talk to is hiring up. They're hiring more people. They're like, oh, fuck, man, like let's build another team. Let's do this. Because it was at the time when, you know, a lot of my questions were like, how hard is it to work from home? How hard is it to make this transition? And and whatever else. And that was the response I got of people like, oh, actually, yeah, it's definitely been challenging to move to work from home, but also everyone is fucking hiring. And so there was this huge surge. And I think part of it is because all the numbers of engagement and sales and whatever else for games went up because everyone was staying home. Which you look at and you go, well, clearly, eventually everyone's going to have to leave home again. So don't count on these numbers being the same next year, the year after, whatever it is. But everyone hired up thinking that like, well, whatever, we'll just keep making, now we can make 2 games instead of 1 because we have 2 teams, because we have this, and so everyone, the economic factors about borrowing money made it, in some cases it was more advantageous for them to grow. And so everyone grew. And now, Tiny Build's story feels like kind of one of many in this kind of long running thing over the last, I don't know, year or so, of contraction of oh shit, like we, now we're laying off all these people. We're, the Daedalic is shutting down development because the games aren't coming in good and they can't afford to just keep funding those teams anymore. And, like everyone has to, be real about their numbers in a way that they probably weren't a few years ago when they were hiring up and doing all of this shit. And that feels dumb to me. Like, it's easy for me to sit here and say, right? But, that feels insane because I feel like at the time it was very easy to see like, oh, well, these numbers are up because everyone is home because there's a pandemic. And so more people are home playing games, and, and that's not to say that the pandemic is completely over. That's not to say that, there are some people that will work at home forever. And, so some of these numbers will change in different ways. But at the time, I think I was even just like, well, hopefully nothing changes because that seems like something that could go real bad unless they can keep all these teams busy and keep all these games coming out. And, and so for a lot of companies, or not a lot, but for companies that were doing this expansion, I think some of them looked at it as like, suddenly we've got this cash. Money is cheaper than it was before in whatever weird ways that ends up working out. So we can take out a loan. We can do this. Interest rates are this. And so a lot of them tried to shoot their shot, I guess, is really how you have to look at it. Is like, they were like, fuck man, if we can do this and it all lines up, then we come out on the other end of this a much bigger company, and yeah, that'd be fucking sick and whatever else, right? But then they have 4 missteps and development gets sideways in a way they didn't expect. And, it was hard to find consoles for a long time. And, just like all of the different headwinds that have hit this industry over the past couple of years, that then went and impacted that development and did all that other shit. And, so I can see why a company might take a risk on that stuff and might do an IPO like Tiny Build did. In 2021. Why take Tiny Build IPO? This is something they wrote in 2021 here, I think. No, this is actually, no, sorry. This was written 2 years later. In the middle of the pandemic, it seemed like everyone was raising funding one way or the other. The industry was consolidating at an unprecedented pace. We are a growth stage company. It means the business has a lot of room and avenues to grow. The risk with not attracting extra funding during that stage and when macroeconomics are great is that you get left behind. Other companies invest more capital and grow faster, and you may not be able to afford to innovate, invest, or research. Not raising funding wasn't an option. There were 3 viable paths for us at that point: sell the company, raise a round of funding, or go public. And then he goes on to explore each of them. But yeah, this is something that it looks like the CEO wrote after they were on, after 2 years after they went public. They went public in March of 2021. So, like, there you go. Like, those are the reasons why they felt they needed to do a thing, right? Is they're like, fuck, if we don't do this, then we're going to be a small company and we'll get left behind. When technology advances again, we'll be ill-equipped to meet it head on. We'll be, like the the fear of your company becoming obsolete to the competition means that you have to then join in on, like, that sentence is, the risk with not attracting extra funding during that stage when macroeconomics are great is that you get left behind. It's like, everything's a risk, right? And so I guess they had to look at it and say, like, well, we have to go for it because the risk of not doing this is an even greater risk. And so a lot of companies, it felt like, overextended themselves, or extended themselves, I guess I should say. You know, some of them are probably hanging on and you know, they made it out the other side or trying to make it out the other side without massive layoffs, maybe just minimal ones. I don't know. But it just, the last few years really fucked a lot of people over. And you look at it, maybe it's easy for me to sit here in this chair and say, well, they shouldn't have fucking done that. But, you know, if you're a growth stage company where your number one goal is to grow, which I might argue is bad, but again, you know, they were already in a point where they had raised enough funding from enough investors, and the investors' expectations were, you're a growth stage company, so you're going to grow and we're going to make our money back. That's what you do. You're not going to sit here and make your one game a year and keep everybody employed. That's boring. You're here to make us, the investors, more money than we gave you, right? That's probably something like that. It's usually how that stuff works. And so they may have basically just been forced into doing this as a result of, like, well, you know, the investor expectations are this. It's why, you know, like smaller companies that are owned by their own people didn't do this. I was thinking about, you know, because Supergiant has been in the news as a result of them being on the short list of companies that Microsoft was thinking about buying. And I was thinking about the notion of Supergiant being owned by anyone other than the owners that own it. And thinking about that and going, oh, that'd be fucking weird. You know, and they're two different companies and two different sizes and scopes and all that other stuff. But, you know, you didn't necessarily, and Supergiant is hiring right now, but you didn't necessarily see Supergiant out there going like, we're raising 9 rounds of funding and then we're getting ready to do, you know, they didn't go public. They didn't go and quadruple in size as far as I know. Maybe they did. I don't know. I've not talked to anyone over there in a bit, but you know, you saw other studios that were more kind of independent focused in that way, where they have not leveraged their existence to investors quite the same way. And some of them did not go out and quadruple in size and try and catch a fucking shooting star to ride them to the billionaire land or whatever it is. So yeah, I don't know. I just, again, the tiny build thing on its face is not the most interesting news story in the world. I would have skipped over it otherwise, but just combined with the Daedalic stuff and some of the other stuff that's been going around lately, I thought it was interesting that, you know, to see them go like, oh, hey, we're a growth stage company. And that they felt that they had to do this, almost that it would be irresponsible for them to miss this wave of free money. And now here they are 2 years after that IPO in a position where they're like, ugh, our sales were whatever. But like, you know, so they're, whatever they're saying, they're like, hey, but also we're trying to reshape this company to turn it around. And when, you know, this story is not necessarily one of massive layoffs at Tiny Build or anything like that. It's just like, it's more indicative of just like, things are tough all over, and people made some calls that, like, it's easy to look at now and say, these were maybe questionable calls. But who knows, if they had known that, would they have actually been able to get away with not raising money if they have investors that want their money back? Like, yeah, I guess we got an IPO. That's the situation they're in. So I don't know. Yeah, yes, Daedalic is, to answer the question, Daedalic is just shutting down their in-house development. They will continue to exist as a publisher. And they say they have something like 8 games lined up for this fiscal year or whatever. And then the other big story has been the kind of ongoing Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard stuff. This hit the American court system. The Federal Trade Commission is attempting to delay the acquisition, which is supposed to close pretty soon here. And so this was really a blocking effort on their part to go like, no, we need more time to prove our case. You need to give us an injunction. And you know, Microsoft and Activision saying like, no, you'll cost us $18 billion if you do that. Or I don't know if that's the exact number, but there's some weird amount of money that is in the break clause, or they would have to extend the deal or whatever else, and so on and so forth. So so this has been, again, the CMA in the UK has tried to block this sale. That is going through some kind of appeals process that doesn't sound super favorable to Microsoft. The FTC effort feels like something that Microsoft was 100% expecting to see. The timing might not be working out great for them, but it sounds like that they were fully expecting this level of investigation and this level of thing to happen here in the United States. And so they have been in court in San Francisco for a little bit here. And there's just been fun little tidbits coming out. You know, anytime all these guys get in court, someone fucks up redacting documents, some email gets out that makes somebody look like a fucking dick. There's always something, you know, with the Epic and Apple stuff. It was, you know, some of the crossplay details on Sony got out as a part of that, making Sony look like jerks back then. Trying to think what else came out of that, you know, but there was just like weird emails, like was like Tim Cook had no idea who Tim Sweeney was in some email exchange or something. You know, it's like real silly stuff like that ends up getting entered into the public record, I suppose. But a lot of the stuff ends up supposing to be highly redacted. Of course, someone decided to redact a document with a pen, and then when they scanned it in, you could read the document anyway. You've got emails from Jim Ryan where he's basically saying like, we're not really too worried about the acquisition. And then now, you know, they've spent a ton of time trying to throw every monkey wrench they can at Microsoft to try to fuck up this acquisition. And in the UK, it felt like they took the bait in some ways. Like some of the efforts that's happened over there felt more like that the government was working on Sony's behalf as opposed to the public's. And that's something that came up in this court case in the US, where one of the FTC lawyers, I guess, at one point said like, well, this would cause real problems for Sony in a monopoly situation. And the judge was just like, I don't care. Like, what? We're not here to help Sony. We're here to make sure that the public is not getting fucked over by this acquisition. Like, this is like, come on. I have not been following this stuff blow by blow because I simply cannot anymore. But there's been some little bits and pieces here, but I guess it is the real bulk of it is something that I wanted to kind of separate out and talk about a little bit, because it's one of those things you look at, and as someone who's been around this for a lot of decades, you see this stuff and just go like, huh, yeah, of course. But it is the idea that like a lot of these emails from Microsoft people don't, and some of these are older emails, and Microsoft is trying to play, well, that was our strategy then, this is not our strategy now. But there's like bits and pieces in the emails where they're just like, this would, and it's not even about the Activision acquisition per se, but it's more just like, this would be a good way we could put Sony out of business, and talking about their competitors in ways of just like, yeah, let's fuck them over, let's shut them down. And I just want to say, yeah, it's always like that. No matter, and I've tried to say this, because Microsoft has been very careful with their public image, right? They have been, and I do think that at the core of it, they do firmly believe what they're saying. That like, oh, actually, it doesn't necessarily, it's everyone should be making these gaming machines. Everyone should be doing all this sort of stuff. Those different Like, oh, we're all in this together to a certain extent, and a rising tide, and blah, 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 you know, and you know, I care, you know, the Xbox position of, well, we care about Xbox players. We, you know, we're focusing on them and trying to make sure that they're getting the blah, blah, blah. And then you see all these emails where they're just like, oh, actually, you know, hey, you know, we're doing this deal, and it's, and in their mind, like, I'm sure there's, you know, the first and foremost thing is always going to be, when they're spending money, they're going to be like, well, we're spending this for our business. We're spending this because it helps our business. But if along the way, they can also say like, and we fucked over Sony in the process, I'm sure they're fucking stoked. And Sony has been attempting to fuck over Microsoft for years with exclusives, with everything else. And now with this acquisition, Sony has been very publicly trying to fuck over Microsoft in a way that I think makes them look shitty, but is also unsurprising. And so, like, seeing various emails come out that are just like, oh yeah, fuck these guys, they're doing this, they're, you know, like not that there's cursing in the emails, but I don't want to misrepresent them that way, but that it's, you know, that it's more of a competition than people like to talk about in public, right? When they're just like, oh man, remember when Jeff Keighley got Phil Spencer and I guess, was it Jim Ryan at that point, or was it still Sean Layden? And they all three of them got on stage at the same time and blah, blah, blah. Wow. You know, it's like, yeah, sure. They show up at industry events and they're like, hey, what's up? Yeah, you know, I'm not going to fucking shank you in the parking lot. It's not like that, but they're competitors in business. Remember when fucking Sega people were fucking trying to fuck over Sony people? We'll get into that a little bit. We got some Tom Kalinske emails from the mid 90s to talk about. And, you know, so some people have taken this as like, oh my God, Microsoft is so two-faced. Can you believe it? Like, what, were you born fucking yesterday? How long have you been on the job? How long have you been covering? Like, what? Yeah, no shit. Guess what? It's business. In some cases, that can be a little cutthroat, or at least not as nice behind closed doors as it is out in front of the public. That shouldn't come as a shock that when you're talking about your competition in private, that you have maybe a different tone about it. Because at the end of the day, that's always the situation, right? It's going to be like, hey, yeah, you know, like realistically, we're going to all get along. And like the public thing is probably the more realistic thing. And then behind closed doors, it is a little more like, it sure would be nice if we could fuck these assholes into the dirt and not have to ever worry about them again. Instead, I can't get Final Fantasy on my console that I control the library for. You know, like, I can't get Final Fantasy over here because these Sony fuckers, those bastards. And Sony's, you know, vice versa. This is how it's been for as long as I have been covering video games. It was like this in the 90s in a very public way, where you had Sony out there fucking sending Crash Bandicoot mascots to fucking golf courses, and, you know, like the very public examples of kind of shitty behavior. But hey, guess what? These businesses are businesses. They're doing the things they do to try to run a better business and try to be the best business. It shouldn't come as a shock. I guess like that was just like some of the tone of the reporting around some of this, where people were like, oh, did you know that Microsoft is not nearly as nice in private as they are in public? I'm like, yes, I did. Yes. Like, I'm not a child. Come on. Phil Spencer said under oath that he would keep releasing Call of Duty on PlayStation. This is from an Axios recap. Though most of the reporting I've seen has actually been Steven Totillo on social media. Like, not all of it has made it into their reporting on the website. Though when I go to the Axios gaming section on the website, the top story is from like May. So I don't know. Axios. I'm left with the impression that Axios does not treat their gaming division as well as they maybe should. Here, from a homepage layout perspective, I'm looking at it and going like, it seems like it could be better. Anyway, It says here, in a dramatic moment on Friday, Spencer told Judge Jacqueline Scott Corley, who will rule on the preliminary injunction, that he vowed to keep releasing Call of Duty on PlayStation. You're testifying under oath that you will do that? The judge asked. Absolutely, Spencer said. I would raise my right hand. I would do whatever it takes. So yeah, I don't know. This story, like so many different parts of the story, are silly. One of the other bits is that it's some of the information about how many players just play Call of Duty on PlayStation platforms. If you remember back on the PlayStation 4, Call of Duty became co-marketing partners with PlayStation after years of doing it with Xbox. And that deal, I guess, is up this year. And so I think Sony has been a little kind of skittish about some of those things, but there's some details in there about some of the numbers around how many hundreds of hours the avid Call of Duty player plays on PlayStation. There's situations where like people buy a PlayStation and then only play Call of Duty on it. And like, if those players went away, what would that mean? And so they're trying to spin this as like what happens if Call of Duty does not appear on this console anymore, which is never anything, even the documents don't necessarily support that Microsoft was ever really thinking of it, because of what we were talking about last week, where Microsoft probably makes way more money. It'd be a big monetary hit for them if they said, fuck it, Call of Duty is only on Xbox. That would lead to console sales, and that would lead to Game Pass subscriptions, but probably not at a rate that would make up for all the money they would lose by disappearing off of PlayStation. Especially for a game that has a free-to-play component with Warzone, for a game that likes to sell skins and fucking weapon blueprints and COD points and blah, blah, blah. It is probably still in Microsoft's interest to make sure that that game exists in as many places as possible, rather than just use it as fodder for building the Xbox brand. And along the way, Sony has tried to throw up things where they're like, well, we wouldn't be able to send, when I think I talked about this last week as well, but like, well, we wouldn't be able to send Microsoft dev kits for our next console because it's Microsoft. And I feel like that stuff is easily like, I feel there are situations where that scenario has presented itself, where like, what's going to happen with MLB The Show, for example? Where that game now appears on Xbox, and I think does it appear on Switch as well? I couldn't tell you. Sony has had the exclusive on that stuff for a very long time, to the point where they were only putting it out on PlayStation, and then Major League Baseball stepped in and said, "Hey, there's a lot more money we could be making here if we did this, and so we're going to go negotiate this, and you're going to start making our game for multiple platforms." Which Sony probably didn't want to do. But here we are. It's been on the Xbox for a couple of years. What's going to happen when there's a new Xbox out? Are they going to send dev kits to Sony? I bet they fucking will. Why? Because it's fucking good for business. And you can probably write up contracts and privacy NDAs and different agreements around that stuff in such a way that if anyone fucked you over and said, hell, hey, by the way, we're taking the specs of the next Xbox and walking them over to the PlayStation people and saying, here you go. Two things there. One, a lot of the decisions around what a console is going to be get made so far in advance that by the time they had a dev kit in hand from Microsoft, Sony would have already made a lot of big decisions on what the next PlayStation was going to be. There's some wiggle room around RAM and some other stuff, as we know. Some of that stuff has definitely changed. Late in development. The other thing I would say is that so many different developers sign so many different agreements around getting dev kits and looking at that information, that if Sony wanted to know what the next Xbox was through a back channel, they could fucking find out. When those consoles get out there, I assume that they could fucking find out, because there's always going to be someone who's going to go, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I got a buddy at Sony. I showed him all the Xbox stuff. Don't tell nobody. And vice versa. There are some publishers, and I put that very question to a few third-party people that I knew a long time ago now. This is like PS4 Pro days. I was like, so, I assume everyone, and I think I might have even asked Xbox about, I think I might have actually asked Phil Spencer about this. And of course, the on-the-record answer is always going to be like, oh, no, of course not. Because it would be illegal. So, there's definitely going to be situations where they're not going to ever own up to having known what they knew when they knew it when it comes to that sort of shit. They're not going to write emails about, like, here are the specs of the next PlayStation, like, whatever. That's phone call type shit. But if the press can find that shit out, then Microsoft could figure that shit out. Then Sony could figure that shit out. If these console specs are leaking out to the media, then clearly you're going to have some multi-platform developer who is friendly with someone at Microsoft, and they decide to share the information. Vice versa. That's not me saying like that. And again, that's not some big scandalous thing. That's just kind of how it's, stuff kind of becomes open secrets. The problem is, if you are in a decision-making phase with your product, if this ever went to court and they could legally prove, oh, you had that information and we know you used our information to build your console in response to our console. If they could ever draw a very direct line there and say, this happened, you got this information here, you made this decision here, the lawsuits, the legal ramifications of that would be fucking nightmarish. It would be, that's like industrial, that's like trade secrets, there's stuff around that would be, it's not worth it. In some cases, like imagine like someone in Phil Spencer's position, even if there are people at Microsoft that would have a pretty good idea of what the next PlayStation would be at that point in the cycle, not right now, but I would bet that like a person in Phil Spencer's position would not have any of those details, because he needs to not have those details. Like there are people in the chain that need to stay fucking clean. And so it's very easy to have a legal situation where the right people in the chain stay fucking clean. You even look at, Phil Spencer's title changed from like head of Xbox to like head of gaming or whatever, right? To me, that said that when Bethesda came on board, they were looking at keeping Bethesda separate, and there was going to be stuff around where those games went, what consoles those games went to. We see it with Minecraft already. And I look at it as a scenario where it would be very possible for you to take the Activision studios and run them separately enough from the rest of the Xbox division that you're not going to, Sony would not be able to legitimately put up these blocks and say like, well, we can't send you the new console. I think it would be very doable for Microsoft to carve out things and say like, okay, no, like this is clean room type shit. These people that are working on the next console are never going to talk to anyone at Activision about that stuff. They will go to them and say, here's what we're thinking about for our next console. What do you think we should do? Those types of meetings, sure, but like they would have had those meetings with Activision fucking anyway. So it's that particular, the bit where Sony tries to claim that they would not be able to send the next PlayStation dev kits to Microsoft, to Activision in the event that the sale went through, strikes me as bullshit. Or like a solvable problem that they are very much trying to present as a deal breaker when I don't think it actually is. Especially in a case where it's in Sony's best interest to get Call of Duty on their platform, they should send them a fucking PlayStation dev kit when the time comes. Pretty simple shit, right? There's some funny stuff from, like, I think it was in the Jim Ryan deposition where they started asking him about console exclusives, and about Starfield and stuff like that in general. And you know, it's funny because he's like, "Oh no, I don't really have any anti-competitive problem with console exclusives. No, that's fine. No, Starfield, no, not an issue. Please don't ask me any more questions about console exclusives. Please don't, because I don't want to have to talk about Final Fantasy. I don't want to have to talk about all of our first-party stuff that doesn't. Which of course it doesn't. It's fucking first-party stuff. Like what, you know, like, you know, it was like, what is someone going to ask him? Like, hey, you're going to put Last of Us on Xbox? Like, no. Fucking no. It's just funny to kind of watch everyone squirm, I guess, and watch them try to logic their way through some of these things in ways that you see are very self-serving along the way. And again, no shame, no blame, you know, like, yep. What would you expect them to do? What would you expect Sony to do after they've gone and secured third-party exclusives for years and how that's their big thing? You know, Microsoft is at least able to put the CEO of Microsoft up there and be like, yeah, exclusives? Yeah, it's not my bag, baby. Like, have him just go like, no, I don't think that's good. It's a lot easier to be in that position when you're not able to be in that position, because Sony is very much in that position, you know, and then they've done that to Microsoft very deliberately over the years. But yeah, I don't know. It's been fun to kind of watch this stuff a little bit. Here's another thing. This actually just got published on Video Games Chronicle. As part of the documents here, yeah, because like there's a ton of documents that got entered into the record. Some of them got erased from the record because they were not redacted properly. And so it was stuff like, what was it? They're like, oh, Last of Us and games like that cost like $200 million to make or whatever. Like, yeah, games are expensive. And that game still made a profit for them. Anyway, sorry, I'm looking this over here. The story just went up. Yeah, because like, people are taking their time to read through the documents and figure out what the hell's in there. This story says Microsoft expects Sony to launch a $400 PlayStation 5 Slim console this year, and also thinks a PS5 Pro console will be released in the near future. This is like a sentence or something. This isn't really, and who knows where they get this. This could be from the same leak that showed up on some website a few months ago. It's, you know, who knows if they have any actual details here that go into this. It just says it expects the PlayStation 5 model to cost the new PS5 model to cost the same as the existing digital edition console, which is $100 less than the PS5. And there's a quote here from the doc says, PlayStation likewise sells a less expensive digital edition for $399.99 and is expected to release a PlayStation 5 Slim later this year at the same reduced price point. And another quote here from the doc. PlayStation, meanwhile, currently offers two different versions of the PlayStation 5, one with a Blu-ray player for physical media and one without, and is anticipated to release further differentiated Pro and Slim models in the near future. Microsoft also weighed in on the price of the Project Q, which is the Sony streaming device. The quote here is, Sony is also anticipated to release a handheld version of... This is a real... Okay, this is... The way this sentence is written should be the thing that you take into all of the other stuff I just read, and that kind of grain of salt about like, okay, like they're framing this in a very specific way. And that is a way that is not necessarily accurate or detailed, I guess. It's not that it's inaccurate, it's that it's lacking in detail that doesn't tell the whole story. They've omitted something here. See if you can figure out what it is in this sentence about the Project Q. Sony is also anticipated to release a handheld version of PlayStation 5 later this year for under $300. What's wrong with that sentence? See if you can pick out the thing with that sentence. Because like, kinda, yeah, they are releasing a handheld device that will play PlayStation 5 games. And it will probably be under $300. If that thing ends up $299, I personally think it's dead in the water. That's way too much money to pay for that fucking thing. But it is not a handheld version of the PlayStation 5 by any stretch of the imagination. It is a remote play device. You will still need to own an actual PlayStation 5 to use it. So, you know, like in some cases they're writing these things for a mainstream audience that isn't going to know, because like the judge and you know, seeing some of the responses and seeing some clips here and there, the judge in this case seems very dedicated to slowing things down and asking questions and trying to genuinely understand this shit, because it's stuff that I think, you know, hey, if you're listening to this show and you know you're following this stuff to any degree, it's old hat to you. You know what it's like. It's a remote streaming device. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as a handheld PlayStation 5. It's whatever, you know. But you know, writing to an audience like this, and also probably writing in a way that deliberately tries to make Microsoft's efforts sound not comparable, because Microsoft is trying to sound as small, and they're like, we're just the little guys. You got to let us buy this Call of Duty company because we're getting fucked over here. And then the other lawyers, have to kind of clean up the mess to try to correct the record and whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting. It has been an interesting look at a lot of this stuff. So I look at that and you know, will Sony release a slim PS5? Will they release a PS5 Pro? There's been some leak style reporting pointing to that has been around for a little bit now. I don't really know what to make of that, whether that's truly accurate or not. I know that that's probably something that they would have started thinking about by now. It's sensible for them to go like, oh, okay, what's this? Because some of that reporting was around like, oh, what if we did this digital console and then sold a clip-on Blu-ray drive for people that want one, because that simplifies their product line. And they still sell two different versions of it. Just one comes with the Blu-ray drive and one doesn't, but it's more of an external thing that you bolt onto it. That makes sense to me. I haven't heard anything specific one way or the other on that, so I'm not like corroborating that, but like from a, hey, this simplifies the product lines, this makes it easier for us to make more PlayStation 5s if we don't have to make two fully different ones. We just make one, and then some of them get packed in with this external drive, and then some of them don't. I think that makes sense. And it also frees up some production lines in case they did want to make a PlayStation 5 Pro. That's an even larger ball of wax. I guess. I don't even know what to make of that. The idea of a PS5 Pro, because I feel like a lot of the conversations we have about the current consoles are that these generations feel like they're just getting started, or, you know, like, because the consoles were so supply constrained for so long, and now you can go get one. It's not hard. They're not being scalped. It's not crazy. But like any talk about a pro console right now feels bad to me. It feels bad inside. I feel bad in here. Because on one level, I'm like, oh, actually, you know, I do think that there's some of the power stuff around the PlayStation 5. I feel like I wish it was more powerful, you know, like, but also for its current price point, I get why it is the way it is, you know, and so I look at that and go like, well, you know, but this stuff. Again, we don't know where Microsoft got this information from, and when we look at the sentence about like they're releasing a handheld PlayStation 5, it'd be very easy to see like them sourcing this from the same leak that we are all sourcing it from, and just throwing that in here and just going like, here, hopefully no one, because Sony can't push back against it because it would confirm their plans one way or the other. I mean, I guess if they did it and redacted it or something, maybe that would work. But, you know, they can throw this stuff out there and be like, oh, well, we're pretty sure Sony's releasing a PS5 Pro in the coming months, in the near future here. Sony can't really come out and say, yes, we are. If they are, they can't lie in court and say, no, we're not, if they are. It's a weird. Anyway, that case is still ongoing. I don't know. I don't know where I have no idea where I stand on this issue anymore and what should happen. I still think that I still don't think that Call of Duty going to Microsoft would be all that bad because, again, I don't think they'll remove it from PlayStation. I think that Microsoft's future, when you look at the numbers, when you look at how they're painting themselves and how they're trying to position themselves, which you can't necessarily take at face value because, again, they're trying to make themselves look small so that they can get this deal over the line. You just look at it and go like, yeah, in some sick way, Microsoft is a third party that still makes a console. Not that all their games come out on PlayStation. That would be the kind of the last shoe to drop, I suppose. But they put all their stuff out on PC. Their first party stuff has been maybe not as impactful as it was 2 generations ago. And so, Microsoft just, the Xbox brand just feels weird to me now. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they're just like fucking trying to get this deal over the line, and then they're like, oh, by the way, we've gotten a new round. You know, we've decided to really get behind the gaming brand here at Microsoft, and so we've given them $5 billion to go out and do, like, who knows? Maybe they go and try and engineer a whole new console and try to fuck people over. Anything can happen, right? Microsoft has the money to do some real shady shit. Not even shady per se, but shady in the sense that, like, right now they're trying to look as small as possible, and as soon as this deal gets closed, what if they just went like, all right, now we're going to really fucking go for it, and here's this new, here's how we're doing it, whatever it is. I don't know. It's fun to speculate, but also it's exhausting to speculate about this particular topic because it has been going on forever. A few more kind of small bits of news here. The team behind the Go XLR, which is an audio device that I have used for years. A lot of streaming folks, I think, use a Go XLR. That team has been laid off as a Canadian team that was responsible for software and firmware updates for the device. And, at one point there were rumors of them working on a new device entirely and all of this other stuff. But over the weekend, news got out, and I've since, it's on their official Discord for the company that owns that whole thing, which is called TC Hellion, or Music Tribe, I think is the actual parent company there. That the Go XLR team, I guess, has been eliminated. It sucks. It sucks that this is happening. The Go XLR has needed some software updates. So this has been, I guess this is not necessarily surprising because as someone who's been on that Discord, there was like beta software they had been working on for the longest time, trying to add submixes as a feature. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool once it gets out, but I'm not going to touch the betas because it sounded like the betas were just a little janky and whatever else. And it just felt like that their support just kind of dropped off, slowed down. This beta stuff never felt like it was going to resolve. And now here we are. That team has been laid off. And so that kind of, the Go XLR works today. I love it. I have 2 of them. But also it's a thing that, like, you feel like, oh man, there's another one of these. There's another device like this that's better. Like, you could see it. Like, this gets most of the things right, and you go like, oh, if it just had this, if it was a little bit bigger, had one more slider, if it had this, if it had that there's little stuff like that could be better. And the space has become more competitive over time, but I feel like the space for using proper microphones, not USB mics, using XLR microphones, is a much more slim space when it comes to devices that are targeting streaming and that type of recording, I guess, specifically, where you're mixing audio sources from games and PCs and everything like that together. That has been, this has been the device that does enough things right that it has felt great. Elgato has the Wave XLR, which is a similar type setup, but doesn't have hardware sliders. And you know, it's just a big knob that you can plug a microphone into. And then you have to use their software, which is the Wavelink software, for a lot of the audio routing stuff. I think that the Wavelink software is a huge piece of shit. I fucking hate it. It is unreliable. The layout of it is bad. The layout of it is like people that don't touch any audio gear made it or something. Like it sucks. Also, it doesn't have hardware sliders, and that to me is kind of like a mandatory thing. Because I need to be able to, I need to be able to reach up and ride. This has actually become very vital to me outside of streaming in a lot of cases. Like I've got audio sliders up here that I can turn my microphone down. I can turn the microphone back up, like all that sort of stuff. But then I can also turn system audio up and down. So when I fade the music at the start of the podcast, that is me literally reaching up and hitting this slider. I have things like Discord audio on a different channel. And so like, you know, even when I'm not streaming, I can mix the audio as I see fit, where it's like, oh, I'm playing a game and I don't need to hear Diablo chunk skeleton bashing noises. I'm actually watching wrestling on this other monitor too, and I want that to be louder, so I can just go with these sliders and it just gets good to go. It's actually fucking really awesome. Outside of any streaming or recording or whatever else, it's just been a really great device for that. Also, I can push this button even when I'm not streaming, and it still makes me feel good.
I'm gonna gargle your piss.
That button is there for me 24 hours a day. That's not something I just load up for the podcast. That button's just there now. And sometimes you need that. So I've started, and I don't need to, you know, the Go XLR still works. So a team has been working on Linux support for the Go XLR for a while. And that team is now releasing their software for Windows as well. And so it's designed to be a replacement for the official Go XLR software. It works. It's a little clunkier compared to the official software right now, but they're working on it very quickly, and it's coming along. The catch is that they don't have access to the firmware on the device, so they won't be able to flash new features into the firmware on it and expand it the way that maybe it could have been. And so they seem limited in what they can actually do as far as supporting this device in an open source capacity going forward. It's very frustrating, but very cool that team is, you know, the open source folks have been working on a new utility that is designed to replace the official software in some situations. And so that's led to me starting to investigate the other options out there. Not that I don't want to drop my Go XLR, but again, a time will come when it's like, hey, this thing's dated and I need more, or the software has magically stopped working with some Windows update that broke it, and now there's no official support left to fix that, or whatever else. So I've been looking at a couple of devices from Rode and from Mackie, and I'm not sure that either of them do what I want them to do. It's called the Rodecaster Pro 2, and it has more hardware sliders. It's got more buttons that I can make say stuff like this.
I'm gonna gargle your piss.
From the look of it. And it seems like on paper it has most of the features, but the catch is that it doesn't seem like it injects as many virtual devices into Windows. The Go XLR creates 5 virtual devices on Windows, like one for chat, one for your system audio. There's one marked game, one marked sample, which actually controls the audio on those buttons that I'm hitting. One for music. And so you can assign applications to different buses, basically. And so I have a slider that will control, if I'm listening to music, this will just control that, but it will not affect the rest of the system audio. And it's fucking great. It's super useful. The Rodecaster looks like it only has 3 different channels that Windows sees. And actually it's 2, I think, because the other one is meant to be audio from another PC or from another USB device. It's not actually like a fully virtual thing. And so you might have 9 channels and different sliders in front of you on the device, but Windows still, you can only split up Windows into 2 different things. And so that would be system audio and chat. And so my whole thing of like, I need music to be able to be something I can slide on a separate slider seemingly would not be possible. This is stuff that is like, I spent like fucking an hour and a half last night watching fucking YouTube videos about this, because you can go look at the specs for the device and go look at like, hey, here's some videos that we, the creators of this, made and did all, and none of them get into the Windows interface and like what it looks like on the PC side deeply enough for me to figure out if it's going to work or not. And so the Rodecaster does have a ton of outputs and inputs and everything else, but it's designed for you to mix on the device itself. And then the device is only going to send 2 things to Windows: your chat and everything else. And so that it doesn't seem, at least again, I could be wrong here, because this is from me trying to find any video of people showing the Windows system settings with a fucking Rodecaster hooked up. And no one's getting into that. They're getting into like how amazing the preamps are and all this stuff. And like all that stuff I look at and go like, man, this sounds fucking awesome. Maybe I should look at one of these anyway. But I can't get the answer to like the Windows side of things. Same with the Mackie. Mackie has a thing called the DLZ that's a little bit newer. And I have not been able to find any information about how many devices it creates on the Windows end of things. Because a lot of these are designed, like they even have like stuff for standalone recording, where it's like you can throw an SD card in it and just take your fucking mixer and 3 mics and it has 4 headphone outs and whatever else, and bring that somewhere and record a podcast. It's designed to just be like, plop it on a table, plug it in, plug your mics in, and you can do it all right there if that's what you want to do. So a lot of it is, it's higher quality in terms of being a piece of audio gear, because it is designed to be a more standalone kind of mixing desk sort of situation. But I don't know if it does the things I need it to do on the PC interface end of things. Roboting it up in the chat says, I have a Rodecaster. What do you need to know? What I need to know is how many different virtual devices does it create in Windows, and can I control that? Could I create a channel in Windows for every single one of those, or can I route Windows audio across multiple channels so I can have one for game audio, one for music that is playing on the same PC, one for chat audio that is coming out of Discord? Like, how many of those can I have? Do I have any control over those? Because the screenshot I saw of the Windows settings looked like it only had like 3. And it was like Rodecaster, and then Rodecaster chat, and then Rodecaster USB 2, which is the second USB port on the back that is meant to be hooked up to another PC. So if you wanted audio from your other PC to come into the same mix and be deployed that way. Yeah, 2 devices, main audio, 1 for chat on primary USB, and 1 additional audio device on the secondary USB. That's what I thought. See, that's not enough. I need more. Bummer. So I need to investigate the Mackie and see if it's any better on that specific front. And if not, then I'll just hope that the Go XLR continues to work. Or that someone, because I guess there have been quite a lot of firmware updates for the Rodecaster. So maybe they'll eventually add more virtual devices or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Frustrating. The last thing I'll say is Danny O'Dwyer's got them tapes. I don't know if you know, but Danny O'Dwyer has got them tapes. He has created a new YouTube channel that is called the No Clip Game History Archive. We'll get Danny on here before too long and talk to him about it all. He's got a lot going on. He's making a video game. He's digitizing tapes. It's a lot of shit. Danny saved a collection of tapes from a place that was going to get rid of all of their tapes. I guess they had been acquired by some company that, you know, that maybe didn't see value in keeping all of these tapes. Which is disgusting. The idea that they didn't fucking keep the fucking the number of times they tried to throw away those tapes. We had to have all the tapes stacked up around us, and then people would complain about, like, because we sat up near the front of the building, so people would walk through our area more. They'd be like, "It's really a mess." We're like, "Well, I don't know. Give us storage space. Can we have some storage space somewhere in the building?" We don't have a lot of storage space. Like, then I guess the fucking tapes are sitting here, aren't they? Anyway, Dandy's got a lot of tapes from a source that is fantastic. I'm glad that someone was able to save these tapes. I had originally inquired into saving these tapes, and at the same time, I guess Danny was actually saving the tapes, and so I'm glad that the tapes have been put somewhere. Anyway, the No Clip Game History Archive is his new YouTube channel. He's got 21 videos of stuff up here. There's an Infinity Ward studio tour that was shot during the development of Call of Duty 4. There's a Space World 2000 GameCube tech demo. He's got the Microsoft E3 2009 press conference up there in an alarming level of quality. There's a MGS4 era Kojima interview from the reveal of MGS4. Zone of the Enders TGS trailer, a Banjo-Tooie commercial from 2000, A-Train 6 trailer from the year 2000. So it's a wide variety. Some of these are longer than others. There's a Dragon Ball Z, The Legend of Goku 2 development documentary that looks a little familiar. Interviews with the voice actors, the voice cast of Dragon Ball Z, The Legacy of Goku 2 as well. And he's got a lot of fucking tapes. He's stated his plan is to get these things digitized, to get them onto archive.org, to get them all over the place. You know, it's not him hoarding the tapes and controlling them. It is him trying to get the tapes out there to people, which is what I wanted to do with the tapes all along. But boy, it's hard to make time to get the tapes out there at the quality that you wish you could. And so I'm glad that this is happening. I love that Danny has these fucking tapes. Yeah, so go check out what Danny is doing. I guess at noclip.video, but if you're looking for the YouTube channel, the new YouTube channel is called the No Clip Game History Archive, and he is, they've been digitizing these tapes for a little bit now. And you can go watch a very high quality cut of the Devil May Cry 4 trailer. So, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Why don't we get into some emails, huh? I reached over to push a button, but I don't. Still no email music. I'll have to look. See if we can find some. See, I can reach up and hit this slider and just bring the music down. Hardware sliders, so important. And they're fun. Podcast@guard.bike is the email address to send in your emails if you want to email me about podcast stuff. Or questions for the podcast, I suppose. As Wacky Deli has, who says, been playing a lot of Street Fighter 6. What do you think Luke's favorite energy drink is? My guess he's all gamer fuel all the time. No, I think Luke is drinking one of those dumb fucking American flag energy drinks that are like really weak, that are not actually good energy drinks, but they're just like, it's got a guy with a gun on it, and some of these are going to we're doing this for the soldiers that need it. Whether you're a street soldier or a soldier, if you need a soldier through your day, you got that big truck's not going to drive itself. Luke is drinking those exclusively. exclusively. I will not be taking any further questions on this topic because I'm right. Jesse from Macon, Georgia, says Final Fantasy 16 is out now, and I've heard some people say it's the best game in the series. Playing it, I've noticed that it plays more like a Devil May Cry than a Final Fantasy game. Has there ever been another game series that has released a game that was completely different than its predecessors in terms of gameplay, and it wound up being considered the best in the series? Love the show. Thanks for everything you do. Yeah, it's a good question. I do want to check out Final Fantasy 16 at some point because it does seem so fucking weird. And I think it's weird that they have done this. I think it's weird that a numbered Final Fantasy game has basically become a full-on action game. I guess they were cheating in this direction for a while now. But I don't know that I've heard a lot of people saying it's the best Final Fantasy game. That seems like a bit of a stretch. But yeah, I don't know. Final Fantasy 16, like every bit of characters and story that I see about that game, and a lot of the criticism I've seen around the quality of the story, makes it sound like a fucking drag. A fucking drag that plays really well, I guess, is kind of the thing. So I don't really know what to make of that, but I'm interested in trying it for myself. But yeah, I just I wonder, did they start this? Was this always the plan? Was this always the sort of thing to be this style of game to be a numbered Final Fantasy game, or did they at some point decide it was going to be numbered? Or I'd be curious about that. But I suppose again, they have been kind of inching into this more action direction for a little bit now. So I guess maybe it shouldn't be that surprising that they just kind of got there or whatever. But I don't know. I feel, it's weird. I don't have much of an affinity for Final Fantasy. I never really did. I like 4. I thought Tactics was cool. I thought Final Fantasy 1 was a good game when it came out. But that's kind of it. So this idea that Final Fantasy has become like a fucking, that people are comparing it to Devil May Cry, feels bad for my, like, I feel bad about it. Like I hear that and I just go, ugh, what? No, why? What? Ugh. They shouldn't do that. That's wrong. Like, it feels wrong somehow to the core of gaming. There's just something about and it's like a crazy position, right? But it's like nothing about that feels right or good to me. Obviously they've inched out of the full turn-based combat into active time battle and all this different, like, they kept coming up with different systems, but they were still largely recognizable as role-playing games for people who didn't necessarily want to run around and hit a jump button and do all the action game stuff. And so I wonder if there are people who liked role-playing games who feel like, and I think the opinions of this Final Fantasy game, I think, have been all over the place from what I've seen. I've seen some people say it's the worst game of the franchise. Oh God, how dare they? But like, I don't know. I know people that liked role-playing games that didn't play other types of games because the dexterity thing was just not their speed. It was just not something they were into. And so this was a way for them to be able to engage in video games that they, kind of otherwise weren't really going to get into. And you definitely see people that and I guess it changed, for a lot of people at different periods in time, right? Which is like, for some people, the mere introduction of active time battle, of like, now you need to navigate these menus a little more quickly, was like bad for them. And they were like, I can't play the game fast enough, you know? But you know, these were supposed to be menu games, right? It's kind of weird in a way that we've come to this point where they're just like, here's kind of a middling Devil May Cry game, but it's Final Fantasy 16. Ha 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 ha. Like, what? Why did we do this? Couldn't you have called it Final Fantasy slavery opinions? I don't know. Like, what, you know, what are we fucking doing here? It's a weird thing. So I don't know. I want to try it out because, again, you know, like I've not had affinity for that style of role-playing game for decades. Final Fantasy VII was where I kind of went like, yeah, I'm done with these. Look at all these fucking cutscenes. I'm here to play video games, not watch them. Fuck this. And that was it for me in that genre for the most part. With some exceptions. You play this Persona 1, the first Persona game? Hell of a game. Hell of a game. Let's see. We kind of already answered this question a little bit. Garrick writes in and says, I heard you expressing interest in hitbox style controllers. Just wanted to let you know that several owners I know complain of carpal tunnel pain after using them. With a hitbox, you're essentially typing with a keyboard on your lap for hours at a time. Just keep that in mind before investing in one. Like, yeah. I don't know. I don't have too much trouble just typing a lot, per se. Like, I probably wouldn't put it in my lap. Well, in some situations, you would put it in your lap if you're at a tournament or whatever. That seems like the thing. But I always envision that thing being on a flat surface. That's why I think I don't use arcade sticks as much, is because I hate putting them on my lap. I want to have a dedicated hard point for them to be on. Hate typing on something that moves. Like a lap. Is frame rate an old head obsession? Asks Adam from the 805. My friends and I are in our late 30s and refuse to move past 1440p because of the frame rate hit. On the flip side, I have family in high school deep into Fortnite, Siege, and Overwatch who couldn't give a fuck about frames per second. I know it's anecdotal, but did growing up on the Wii, GBA, and Switch skew that whole generation's view of frames per second? Yeah, probably. Like, probably. One of the things I think of as the most, like, kind of... I remember hearing a story that EA's NBA Jam was originally not running at 60 frames per second. And that someone who was employed at EA, that was not working directly on the team, but was advising them, as he was very familiar with the NBA Jam franchise, said, hey, these games run it. You know what? You want to talk about, like, when you want to talk about it as an old head obsession or as an old school sort of thing, it's when you encounter people that refer to it as hertz. Like, hey, Jam runs at 60 hertz. End of story. So I don't know. maybe there's something to that. But I think, you know, a lot of that is, you know, we grew up experiencing a lot of games running at 60 frames per second because a lot of arcade games did, or, you know, 59.97, you know, whatever it is. But a lot of these refresh rates were way up there compared to a lot of these games. And, you know, these days it's not nearly as consistent as it was, but, you know, you go back to the 16-bit era, those games, you'd have slowdown. It wasn't always a consistent 60 hertz. But it was just how those games looked and ran and how they felt, and the input felt snappy and immediate and in ways that felt great. And I think you get a lot of games that are running at 30 and sometimes can't even hold 30. You get these games that drop down to like 22 frames a second, and you're like, you start to feel it in the controls. You feel it in the sticks. You're like, this does not feel right anymore. And so I think that's the thing that matters to me. But again, yeah, if you don't know, if you don't have any of that context, if you're like, hey, fuck it, man, I just like video games, but like I'm not like obsessed with them, you're never going to notice. You're never going to care. You're just going to assume that like, oh, I guess I just suck at the games. Like, well, yeah, maybe, but the game's not doing you any favors. And I think people that say that they don't care or that they don't give a fuck just don't know, and they don't need to know. And they're probably, maybe it's a blissful thing, right? That type of ignorance of just like, oh yeah, I don't know. These games just, yeah, I don't know. This one feels weird. I don't know why. It just does. I'm like, well, it's because it's running at a dog shit frame rate. 4-way split screen on a fucking N64. So yeah, it feels like shit. But hey. Fergus from Brandhall, England writes in and says, last week I came to America for the first time to visit my mate. I was very excited to see your dragon soup alternatives. I tried Mike's Harder Lemonade and the Smirnoff Ice Smashes and was amazed. Then we went to a liquor store in Baltimore and I found a Four Loko. Brilliant drink. Love it. Want more. Can you send me some, please? Well, Fergus, I think a lot of that stuff you can get in some capacity over there, right? I don't know. But I thought Dragon Soup still had energy in it. I thought the UK equivalents still were proper and good. So there were definitely some flavors of Four Loko that I preferred to others. There are absolutely some that taste pretty good. By comparison. But yeah, none of that had caffeine in it. Yeah, Dragon Soup still has caffeine. So I'm desperate to try Dragon Soup. I would love to try some of those ridiculous drinks. Maybe not, actually. Now that I drank a quarter of this hard monster that doesn't have any energy in it, but certainly has alcohol in it, there's definitely the feeling of just like, oh man, it has been a long time since I've had any alcohol. Maybe I should just keep it that way. Let's see. Brian writes in and says, how does Summer Game Fest make money? Is there a certain level of game that pays to be on the show? I imagine things like Mortal Kombat and Alan Wake get there because Keighley courts them, but do games like Remnant 2 and Witchfire have to pay to be included? I'm naive to this stuff. How does Keighley get paid? I would imagine that he sells space the same way E3 does, because when you got to the event that they were having, Mortal Kombat and Alan Wake were there, and I imagine that they paid some amount of money to be there. But also, yeah, I don't know. I don't know which games pay, which games don't. I think there's a mix. That's I think there's a mix, but I don't know for sure. But I think Keighley's probably doing pretty okay. Pretty okay. With his shows and his live space stuff and all that. I suspect that stuff is going pretty well. Randy in Portland writes in and says, there are so many game development companies as well as game journalist outfits that name themselves with some sort of game jargon. Like Splash Damage, Hitbox, 1UP, Cloth Map, and so on. Why? What caused that trend to happen? I've always had an idea that whatever games company would name themselves Game Jargon, just to spite the whole gaming naming conventions. I mean, it happens because you're sitting around trying to come up with a name, and you're like, well, we're a game company. It should be like a game thing. And then someone spits out some phrase that everyone goes, oh, that sounds pretty good. That rolls off the tongue really well. And then you go with that. I don't think a name necessarily has to evoke gaming to be a game company, obviously. But I think it's a part of like you're sitting around trying to come up with whatever it's going to be. And and then you hit upon it and be like, oh, hey, yeah. Or like, yes, hey, this, hey, we did a trademark search on this and no one else has taken it. So we can name it this. It's available. And all of our other decisions are not. So, I imagine it probably comes from that. And that's going to do it. That's going to do it for emails. Julian from Albany actually wants to know, how long do you need to throw an energy drink in the freezer for it to turn into an icy-like substance? I usually go for about an hour from room temperature in the freezer. I'll throw these in about 9 and the show starts around 10. And usually that'll be the right amount of time for them to not be icy. If I put them in earlier or forget about them, then they end up frozen solid. But probably about an hour and a half is where they start to get icy. The other thing I'll say is that these drinks that are not like purely one substance and that they are weird chemicals mixed together, different parts of them are going to freeze before other parts of them. And so in some cases you're freezing the energy and then just drinking the syrup, the water froze and now we're just drinking chemicals and syrup, or vice versa, or you don't want them to get too icy because it really changes the flavor of them and really fucks them up. So I'm going to say don't do that. If it was a solid icy and maybe you were eating it with a spoon or something, maybe, but again, then some of them are even carbonated, and the minute you have an icy carbonated beverage, it fucks it all up. It's a delicate situation. So you gotta ride the lightning. You want it to be as cold as it can possibly get, but you don't want ice chunks to be in it. That's been my experience anyway. All right, that's gonna do it for the show. I have not received a single. I got one email yesterday. I'm not talking about podcast email. I'm just talking about press releases and stuff like that. I got one press release yesterday and nothing today. Truly quiet out there in a way that is almost eerie. But I guess with the big story being a courtroom thing that is not happening because of the holiday, we don't have a lot of new Microsoft stuff to really comb over today or anything like that. So there just hasn't really been a lot of stuff out there. It's been kind of nice. Anyway, that's going to do it for the program here. I'll be back tomorrow to stream some stuff. We did stream Mars First Logistics on Friday, but I do still have a few other things. I have not played any Sludge Life 2 yet. I need to get into that. And I've been playing more Trackmania lately, so I don't know. Maybe we're due for some some relax and get a little Trackmania in or something. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday. If you're in the States and you're doing 4th of July stuff. Oh, you know what? I forgot the Sega email here. There's a document, there's a PDF out there that is like 1997 era Sega docs that are, it's like 300 pages or something. And it's crazy. It's a bunch of sales figures. It's a lot of other stuff. But this email from Tom Kalinske to a bunch of other executives around Sega and some of its affiliated companies here, titled Saturn's Success in Japan, dated March 28th, 1996, says, "It is one thing to hear or read about how well we are doing in Japan versus Sony. It's another to personally witness it. I just visited 10 retail stores in Tokyo, most in Akihabara. It's now spring break, so the crowds of teens and college kids are huge. We are killing Sony. In every store, Saturn hardware is sold out, and there are stacks of PlayStations. The retailers commented they can't compare the true sales rate because Saturn sells out before they can measure accurately. Our interactive displays are better, our software displays and stocking far superior. It is not unusual to see 40 or 50 copies of Panzer's Way or Virtua Fighter 2 stocked in even small stores, and they are selling fast. I wish I could get all our staff, salespeople, retailers, analysts, media, etc. to see and understand what's happening in Japan. They would understand why we will win here in the US eventually. How do we show that at E3? Tom. So that's Tom Kalinske. He was the head of Sega at the time, kind of getting close to being on his way out there. Saturn days, saying that it was crazy to see how big it was. The Saturn stuff was moving in early '96 in Japan. And the answer is, I think that a lot of the Sega product had a wider appeal in Japan than it did here. Virtua Fighter 2 being a really good example of like a game that was massive in Japan, and a game that really didn't catch on in the same way in the States. So, I think there's a lot of reasons there. We don't need to necessarily rehash it. It's well-worn territory at this point. Big Bang Blitz says he didn't know that Sega of Japan would outright sabotage the U.S. branch. Actually, by this point, by March of '96, Tom Kalinske had been sabotaged more than once. I think he had taken his lumps at this point by the time the Saturn was already out. So that doc is out there if you want to find it. It's full of all kinds of weird sales data that I have not looked through to really get my head around what it is. There's like storyboards for commercials and fiscal year 97 brand plans. The Genesis price pack $99.99, value pack $129.99. Additional $2 to $3 margin on hardware with retail software purchases of 3 to 1 and 4 to 1 respectively. Pico hardware $139.99. The retail margin on the Pico was apparently 20%. Sega's margin 7.9%. And then Saturn and some other Saturn versus Sony background. They're comparing price point and sell through. September 95, apparently 130,000 PlayStations were sold, 19,000 Saturns. And then they tried to do some aggressive price cuts in late 95 to try to help, but I think we all know that didn't happen. Sega of America fiscal year, Saturn business plan. Key competitive assumptions, Sony PlayStation, pricing, $249 with software at E3, $199 core sometime in the fall. So remember, this is 97, so it's been out for a little bit at this point. This is like retail margins and overhead and hardware. Hardware and peripherals position Saturn as the technically superior next generation system that provides the best gameplay experience. Establish pricing leadership by preempting Sony at strategically significant times. Leverage exclusive Saturn peripherals, including internet connector and new analog controller. Explore ways to further cost-reduce hardware. Software. Drive Saturn hardware with exclusive arcade and Sega character titles like Knights, Sonic, Fighting Vipers, Virtual On, Virtua Cop 2, Virtua Fighter 2, Panzer's Way. They consistently refer to it as just Panzer's Way in here, which I guess Dell, the funky Homo sapien, was right. Work with third parties to secure 5 exclusives. Yeah, it's an interesting read. Work with Sega GameWorks to build hits at the arcade level. Interesting. You can kind of see how they were leaning on sports, and they have a planning calendar for events, and they have E3 on there, but they also have Lollapalooza on there. They're like, we got to get to Lollapalooza because that's where the cool kids are, which is funny. It's just funny seeing, marketing calendar for, apparently they had a marketing budget for Bug 2, the marketing budget was $98,000. For Knights, it was $201,000. For Fighting Vipers, it was $181,000. Look, man, that's more than Sonic for the Saturn was apparently $149,000, but maybe that's like Sonic Jam or some weird repack type thing. That's maybe not that big a deal. But that's just for print. That's not even for TV. TV, obviously, way more expensive. $3.3 million in television advertising for Knights. Virtual Cop 2 and Virtual On, unfunded in the budget for television. Like, nah, we don't need to do Virtual Cop 2 or we don't need to do Virtual On ads on TV. The right audience will find that. Marketing calendar, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Bug. Yeah, we got this KFC plan with Bug. It's going to be a big deal. Everyone's going to be eating chicken and talking Bug later this fall. That document's floating around out there. I think SegaRetro.org is hosting it. But look it up, grab it. I'll look through it, and if there's anything else that jumps out at me, maybe we'll talk about it some more next week. But it's interesting to get a look at this stuff because this is such a weird time for Sega, right? This is when you knew. By 97, you knew how this was going to go. And so, you know, watching them go through their brand review and talk about like, oh, the strength of Saturn and all, you know, like, guys, it's a fucking wrap. It's not going to happen. I don't care how big your sports games are. But this shows you, like, you know, you have to have this mentality, right? If you're at Sega in 97, you've got to be, you can't just like tail between your legs, show up at work every day and be like, fuck this. You've got to be like, hey, we got to fucking make this happen. We got to believe it. We got to fucking walk it first. And then we got to get out there and believe this shit and make it fucking real. And so that was what they were trying to do, I guess. College Football 2. Sell in and sell through disappointing. Sega Sports Key Issues, January 96. Issue, Primetime Performance, a disappointment versus NFL 95. Madden outselling Primetime 4-1. Yeah. Yeah, so it's like them taking their fucking lumps and trying to fucking figure it out. But they've got like some SNES unit sales for 95 compared to Genesis unit sales. So it's like this document I think is dated 97, but there is some stuff that goes back to 96 and 95, which again, super pivotal, interesting time for Sega because this was when they were fucking walking away from the 32X. Next steps for the Genesis 32X. Test market, $49 and $29 core prices. Test market, Genesis Virtua Fighter Pack. Confirm component scrap value for hardware. Estimate scrap value for software. So that's a business plan of them going, we've got a warehouse full of these things. If we sell them for scrap metal, what'll we get? Because no one's going to buy this fucking 32X ever again. That's wild. Next steps for the Nomad. Toys R Us buyback plan? Oof. Yeah. Interesting doc. Go check it out. Anyway, I'm going to head out. Have a good one. Have a happy 4th, regardless of where in the world you are. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye.